Welcome to FCTV podcast. I am here with Jeff Wabik. He is CTO of BLOX. He has been building and shaping networking technology for almost 40 years. He actually helped pioneer the world's first multi-gigabit router back in the early 90s. And since then, he's worked everywhere from startups to major telecom companies like Ciena and Lucent Technologies. Ooh, Lucent, that's a throwback.
It is a throwback.
Yeah. These days, he's focused on the future of data centers, connectivity, and the infrastructure powering AI and hyperscale growth. Also, when he's not deep in tech, he's flying planes, snowboarding, working out, or playing drums in rock bands, which may make him one of the coolest CTOs I've ever interviewed. Jeff, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you for reminding me how old I am. I appreciate that. That's really good.
Well, hey, I mean, I covered Lucent Technologies, so how old does that make me?
Companions.
Yes. There we go. Okay.
I tell you what, it's been a journey.
It's been a journey.
It's been a journey to get here today, in particular today, but just this last 40 years has just been such a, the phrase I've been using lately is beautiful insanity. So much beautiful insanity over all the years and evolving technologies and making things work. It's just, I'm just so fortunate to have been able to be part of all of this. It's great.
That's great. Okay. Tell me about BLOX. I want to say roadblocks. I know that's like so ridiculous, right? I have small children, so you can.
No, it's the opposite of roadblocks.
Okay.
It's DC blocks.
Okay.
So I actually had my 12th anniversary of DC blocks just last week.
Okay. Congratulations.
Thank you. DC blocks is a data center infrastructure provider. We're based in Atlanta. In the last few years, we've pivoted. We started in the early days in 2016, 2017, building what we call regional data centers in underserved markets. So we're based in Atlanta. We said, well, we don't see anything in Chattanooga, Tennessee, so we'll go plop a data center there. We don't see anything in Huntsville, Alabama. We'll go plop a data center there. And these were small, half megawatt, 2 megawatt facilities or whatever. And the plan was to do that in the, we call it underserved markets around the Southeast. If the city had an NFL football team, probably not there.
Okay.
Sort of every place else, right? And we're doing that, built a really nice business. It's a lot of fun, meet a lot of great people, sort of every bank, every university, every law firm, every, whatever, legal and legal government, enterprise, education. But a few years ago, through a twisty story that's probably too long for the conversation today, we had the opportunity to build a cable landing station in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina for Google. And the word I use when I talk about doing things is you want to deliver quality, and quality to me means doing what you said you were going to do.
Okay.
Right? So that's quality. So we got the opportunity to do the cable landing station for Google. We delivered quality for them, right? We did what we said we were going to do. There's always a few little wiggles, right? And some things that maybe didn't quite hit the timeline, but we did what we said we were going to do. And, they loved us and said, well, hey, you did a really nice job with that. So how about this thing and this thing and this thing? So, we have been since then pivoting to focus on the hyperscalers and the multi-hundred megawatt or gigawatt campuses rather than the 2 megawatt campuses. So we've really pivoted in the last few years. So the three things we're focused on now are hyperscale campuses, hyperscale edge or network nodes, and hyperscale fiber connectivity outside plant.
Okay. All right. So I've been hearing a lot of that word hyperscale.
Yeah.
How big are we talking about here?
Well, so, hyperscaler is the word that we use to describe, Meta, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, there's some others, Oracle in there, right? So these are the guys that do things on this epic scale. So can I get the University of Alabama system? Is that big for Alabama? Sure. But, Amazon and Meta, especially, these are global companies with billions of users, whether it's social media, or whether it's Gmail, or whether it's YouTube, or whatever.
So when you're building out like a data center for them, like what's the scale compared to what you had been doing? Like how much bigger are we talking about?
Yeah, so the very first data center, here's a really great contrast I think that'll be applicable here, right? So the very first data center for enterprise that we ever put on the ground was a 500 kW data center in Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Okay.
And it's still there, and it's full, which is great. When we're building the hyperscale campuses and data centers today, if I say, what an ILA is an inline amplifier.
Okay.
So if I've got a data center, in this city and another data center in this city, I'm gonna put fiber between them. right? I've got to amplify the light along the way, right? So every 50 miles or so along the fiber, I have to build a little hut. It's called an ILA, an inline amplifier site. So I put this little building, and then the fiber comes up out of the ground. I run the light into a special piece of equipment that amplifies it, stick it back in the ground, and I do that every 50 miles till I get to my destination. I'm right now in the process of designing the next generation of ILA building, which is about 1,000 square feet, that is going to be almost twice as big in power capacity as the first data center we put on the ground 10 years ago. So just the little feeder elements, just the little sprinkles that live on the ground between the data centers, the hyperscale campuses, are bigger than the first data center we put on the ground in 2017 or 2016, I think it was, right? So that gives you an idea of just what is happening at these hyperscale campuses. It's huge. You know,
Right.
we're focusing right now on a 1.2 gigawatt design. So 1.2 gigawatts, that's 1,200 times bigger, 2,400 times bigger than our first building 10 years ago. And, you know, as I read through the news, there are people who are off there designing 4, 5, 6 gigawatt campuses, which is just...
Now, are these all for AI, or what are they doing with all this
so
mega power?
So we're an infrastructure provider, and the way that I
Right.
always say it is, we'll build the building and we'll make it perfect for you, and we'll keep your equipment cold and safe and dry, right? But a lot of these hyperscalers, you know, there's a lot of security. Sometimes it's national security,
Okay.
where they are sensitive about who knows exactly what's going on.
So you don't know what they're doing.
So in some cases, we can get an idea of what they're doing based upon their asks for power or for cooling or whatever it is. It has to be this big. So, okay, well, that must be a whatever it is, or it must have this much power in a cabinet. So we can get a general idea of what we think they're doing. And sometimes we'll say it's an AI inference node, or it's a generative
Right.
node or something
Well,
like
I'm just wondering, is AI
that.
what's driving this now,
it's a
or
mix.
is it? Okay.
It's a whole ecosystem, right?
Okay.
So, you know, we use, you know, for example, you know, is Instagram, and if there's anybody from Meta listening, I welcome you correcting me in case I get this wrong. But if you think about it, you know, is Instagram really AI? So it's like, well, you know, if I post something on Instagram and I like houseplants, well, then suddenly I'm going to get a lot of houseplant things that pop up on my feed. Well, is that AI? You can argue that it is. Or you can say, well, no, it's just an algorithm because you matched houseplants to houseplants, or whatever it's going to be. So I think AI has become an acronym or a phrase that's been so co-opted by literally everything. And what is this microphone is AI, probably, right? According to the manufacturer. So everything is AI. So we don't always really get to know what's going on inside of there, but certainly there's all these corollary technologies, things that come together where you can enhance them with AI. I know, for example, that, you know, a lot of social media feeds, they're getting smarter about how they target their ads at you with AI. You know, when I think of AI, I think more about a machine actually doing some thinking for me. Machines can't make decisions.
Well, I mean, a lot of these, those social media platforms, they're giving you prompts basically, or, you know, I'll write your response for you kind of thing, which I find kind of creepy. I don't really want that necessarily, but
it's helpful. You know, like at first when AI started to become a buzz phrase 5 years ago, I was like, you know, what's the killer app for this?
Right.
And I'm not sure that I know exactly what it is, but I find myself on, you know, Gemini and ChatGPT so many times per day. And sometimes it's you know, how do I get from the airport to this session that we're doing right now? But other times, you know, one of the things I particularly personally love is what I call micro learning. There's times it's like you see something in the world and it's like, well, how does that thing work? You know, or they just did the mission around the moon, right? Where they slingshotted the ship around the moon and it came back. It's like, you know, dear Gemini, show me the physics of how you do this. Right. And so, you know, I take 3 minutes, just read through this, like, wow, I had no idea. So I've really enjoyed AI, you know, not only for what it does for me behind the scenes that I can't see, but for me just to micro learn and have a way to get sufficiently reliable information. Sometimes the AI engines hallucinate a little bit. You ask them a question and you have to say, wait a minute, that's not right. And they say, oops, I'm so sorry. You know, Gemini actually said to me, I hallucinated that. Let me try again. But
so you're at the forefront of building out these hyperscale, mega, whatever you want to call them, data centers. A lot of them coming up all over the country. But there's also been a lot of concern amongst the public. A lot of pushback. Some people have likened it to, you know, some of the pushback that wireless carriers got on 5G. You know, is this going to cause brain cancer? I don't want this in my backyard. You know, but I do think, you know, not to say that I don't think those concerns about your health and 5G are like totally crazy. I mean, I've done a lot of research on it, so I think that it's fine. But I am curious, to hear what you think about the people who are concerned about their electricity bills going up and some of the other concerns about these data centers. I mean, water usage and other impacts on the environment. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, so I'll say this as a start. Our goal when we come into any community or any neighborhood or any region is to be a good neighbor. We do not want to be the bad neighbor that destroys the ecosystem, that kills all the wildlife, that makes the power bills rise, that uses all the... We don't want to be that person. We just don't. So while I think every company has its own sort of ethics and values and morals around those things, the values that we have at DC BLOX, and I'm not going to pound on this, is just we're the most moral company in the world, but the leadership of the company really cares. We really don't want to be that bad neighbor. We just don't. So all of the concerns that we hear, we take them very seriously. And unfortunately, sometimes when you say, I take your concerns seriously, people say, yeah, you're just saying that to make me feel better. But it's really genuinely true. The challenge right now for me, and I think this is a fair analogy, is I think we can all agree that if we go to social media and we see things about politics and our politicians, you're going to find so much misinformation. And a lot of folks look at that information and say, well, if it's on the internet, it must be true, maybe, right? And they embrace that misinformation, and then they maybe enhance it just a little bit when they tell their friends, right? So this misinformation gets its own life, and you end up with a lot of just things that are just not true floating around the world that enrage people, whether it's politics, whether it's data centers, whether it's guns, whatever it is.
Right.
And I think, unfortunately, that's the spot that we're in right now. Is there's just so much misinformation.
Well, tell me a little bit. Let's dig into this a little bit.
Yeah.
So what is the misinformation about the power?
Let's talk about water, right?
Okay, all right. We'll start with water.
And forgive me, sometimes I try to be, sometimes I'm a little colloquial, but we'll have folks say, well, hey, your data center, hey, you're going to come into my community, and I saw this thing on Instagram where, data centers use all the water in the world, and you're going to come and you're going to dig a hole and you're going to put a well in the ground, and you're going to take all the water, you're going to take all my water away, and I'm not going to have any, and don't you do that in my backyard. A couple of thoughts, right? First is, I would never put a $5 billion data center on a well that I'm going to run dry, because then I don't have water for the data center, number one. So just thinking that through, would anybody build any kind of a plant anywhere that's going to, in 20 minutes or 20 months, whatever, exhaust the resource, and then you can't use the facility anymore?
Right.
So just thinking it through, that's the problem. But there are certainly cooling solutions that use evaporative technology that do use water, actually consume water. We don't use any of those. So talk to the people who are building the data center in your backyard and ask them what they're doing. The systems that we use are closed systems, and I'm not sure how much you know about traditional cars with an internal combustion engine, but there's water in there, right, that cools the engine.
Yeah.
So there's water, and it gets into the engine and it gets hot, and then they plummet through the radiator and it cools down, right, as you're driving, and then the cold water go back in the engine to cool down the engine. So it's a closed loop system.
Okay.
Right? So the data centers that we're building, we might put in on day one, let's call it an Olympic-sized swimming pool worth of water, about 600,000 gallons. Or something like that of water. So do we use water? Well, yes. Okay, give me that 600,000 gallons of water, but that water is literally going to stay there forever, right?
Okay.
In a big closed loop where I cool it, and then I run it through the parts of the data center that generate heat and cool that heat, do a heat exchange there, and then it stays in a big closed loop. I might have some parasitic loss. I might lose a gallon or two a year. There's a little dribble here or a leak there or something like that. But so do we use water? Yes, water is a vehicle that we use for cooling. But we don't consume water. We don't consume water and make it go away. Right.
Okay.
So that's one.
And you're not tainting the groundwater or...
Well, we're not interacting with the groundwater at all.
Okay.
Right. So we're going to go to the public utility and say, hey, XYZ municipal water supply, give us a feed.
Right.
And we turn on the spigot, and however they give us the water.
And you're going to pay for the water that you use.
And we're going to pay for the water that we use. And, in the scenario that I just gave you, right, it doesn't go back into wastewater. Right?
Okay.
We just keep it and use it forever. So,
right.
So there's no pollutants. There's nothing that goes back into the groundwater because we're not using the groundwater.
Right. All right. So let's go on to the next one. Electricity.
Yeah.
It consumes tons of electricity. How is that not going to, and a lot of the power grid needs to be upgraded, which
Sure.
I understand needs to be upgraded anyway.
Yeah.
But, I think a lot of, people are saying that that's going to affect my rates, and it's going to happen much more rapidly because, Google's data center wants to go where it's going to go.
Yeah. So a couple things to remember, right? First of all, power utilities are like the most heavily regulated, I shouldn't say the most, one of the most heavily regulated things on planet Earth, right? So they can't just wake up today and say, hey, guess what, Mr. Consumer, I'm doubling your prices. So that just doesn't happen. And if you, we all get emails, we all get notices in the mail that say, from the power utility, just for my own home, right? It says, hey, 6 months from now, there's a big hearing where we're going to propose a rate increase because the cost of coal or the cost of natural gas or whatever it is increasing, so we need to increase the rates, and it's going to be 0.02 cents per kilowatt. So all that happens. So in fact, there are vehicles to raise rates, but it's not just overnight. It's not just like you wake up tomorrow and your power bill is going to be double. Second of all, you answered the question in the way that you asked it. You said the power grid does need to be upgraded, and it does. We're making significant strides in using electric vehicles, right, which are a huge consumer of electricity, right? But all of this is actually mandating that the power utilities just get better at what they do, become more green, get some solar, get some wind, get some offshore wave action generation.
But who's going to pay for it?
Well, it all goes into the ecosystem. Right? Who paid for the power plant the first time? Right? You just get a power bill. You just get a bill that says, right, I'm paying 12 cents a kilowatt hour. When you built your house and put it on the ground, they said, well, you have to pay for you have to write me a check for $50,000 to pay for your share of the power plant. That's not how it works.
Right.
Right. So it's actually.
But I do think that when upgrades are made, ratepayers feel it. Or
I'm not going to pretend that I know all the nuances of how a BTU of natural gas or a little block of coal gets turned into power and at what rate and at what cost. I'm not going to pretend that I know that. But I think we can all agree as we look around the world and look at how our world has become so much more efficient in the last 10, 20 years. We started off this conversation by saying how old we are, right? So in our lifetime, how much more efficient is everything? Can you use your visibility to the world and reasonably imagine that power generation done in 2027 with the equipment in 2027 is much more efficient than it was in 1977 or 1957 or 47. So in fact, we do need to upgrade the power grids for a lot of reasons. But the power grids are going to be more efficient. Again, I'm not going to pretend that I understand the nuances of how this is all priced, but that efficiency is actually going to be an improvement over time. And we need to do it anyhow, right?
Right.
The other thing I want to point out is not to be glib about this, but it is the demand of people using social media that is driving the demand for data centers, that is driving the demand for power. And so there's a causal relationship between what people want and crave, and then
nobody wants their Instagram to go away.
All right, I don't want my Instagram to go away, right? So, but there's a direct causal relationship here, right? That we
don't take forget. My TikTok.
And I've seen, I can't tell you how many anti-data center memes and posts I have seen on Instagram and on social media.
Yeah.
And I want to say, did you know that you are actually creating the very demand?
Right.
Right. That's causing folks to want to build a data center near you that you hate. Right.
Yeah.
So it's just something to think about.
Yeah. No, I hear you. Do you think that some of these sort of protests against having data centers, do you think it's going to sort of derail some of the build out and hold things back or slow it down?
It already is.
Okay.
It already is. I'm not going to speak. So we're heavily involved in this, right? We've got several construction projects underway right now. That were shovels in the ground, right? We're actually digging dirt and the data center is approved and it's going to go. We've got other future builds that we're proposing in different markets or different regions or different cities. And, without getting into specifics, there's a lot of back pressure. There really is. You go to a town hall and, this might not sound genuine, but it is. I want to hear people's feedback. I want to hear what their concerns are. I want to hear why they think this is a bad idea. When you tell me that, let me help you understand my perspective about why I think it's not, and hopefully we can find a way to agree or disagree what we're going to do, right?
Right.
But there's a lot of anger, and I said it. I think I said it early in the conversation. I think there's as much misinformation on data centers on social media as there is about politics.
Right. Well, and this kind of leads to my next question. So, certainly there's a lot of people who love their Facebook and their Instagram. But they also say, sure, I love those things and I want to keep doing them, but, I don't want that big data center in my backyard.
Not my backyard.
And honestly, a data center doesn't really bring with it a lot of work so you go into a community, it's not like you're creating like tons of jobs, maybe for the initial build out,
Yeah.
but they're not like sort of jobs that are going to stick around. So what are the benefits? I mean, what can you tell people to say like, no, actually, this is going to be a good thing for your community?
Yeah. Well, so a couple of facets, or a couple of ways to think about this. First, not just in directly providing the thing that they want. They want Facebook, they want Gmail, they want YouTube, they want this thing. So it provides those things. So that's interesting. There certainly is a job base that's created from it. During the build out, we have thousands and thousands of people on site, concrete work, electrical work, having a really hard time finding electricians, right? Really super hard. So a lot of work in the building phase. Once the data center is on the ground, on a per square foot basis, there's not as many people inside the data center as you think there would be, because some of the equipment is sort of set it and forget it, right? Only when something goes wrong do you go up and have to pay attention to it. But the thing I want to point out, and this is several other benefits, but one of the things I really want to point out is tax base, right?
Okay.
So if I go and buy a piece of land from someone, it used to be a farm, used to be whatever, right? And I buy the land, it's 200 acres, and I'm going to put a $5 billion building on that piece of land. Let's not argue about if it's pretty or if it's loud or if it uses water. We've kind of talked about that. But I'm going to put a $5 billion building on that property. Okay, we all pay property taxes, right? So the jurisdiction assessor is going to come and say, hey, look at you. You've got a $5 billion building. You owe me this much taxes just for the building, and that's every year.
Right.
Okay, so number one, property taxes on the building itself. Number two, business personal property tax. Every piece of equipment that's inside that building is also assessed by the jurisdiction, and you pay property tax on that equipment as well. So I'm not gonna throw out a number, right? And if you say, well, if it's a gigawatt campus, how much benefit does that bring to the tax base of the community that it's in? But it's a $5 billion building, or a $3 billion building with a B, with another $3 billion worth of equipment inside. I'm not sure how much personal property was taxed in that jurisdiction prior to that. But if you've got a really small county that maybe had 2,700 inhabitants, this is probably 90.
Right. So even without the people they are working,
right, it's potentially hundreds of millions,
generating
of dollars,
some
hundreds of millions
revenue.
of dollars of tax revenue to the various jurisdictions, which are then used for roads and bridges and potholes and schools and hospitals and all the things we use taxes for.
Yeah.
Right? So I get it. You're scared that this building is going to come in and it's going to be loud and it's going to be stinky and it's going to poison your water and it's going to do these things. And sometimes people are immune to facts. They don't really want to hear the facts, and we see this in politics a lot too. So I do understand. The not in my backyard piece. There's maybe things I don't want in my backyard. So I do understand that. But it's a dialogue that we do want to have. But at the same time, when that does get put on the ground, the benefit in the tax base of the community could be dramatically more than anything they have seen in the history of that community.
Yeah.
And I don't want to just make that the only thing, because emotionally, as humans, right, we're in this world where, left half of our brain is analytical and the right half of our brain is emotional. And for me in my life, when those two hemispheres of my brain agree, decisions are really easy,
right,
with relationships or whatever it's going to be. But this can be a situation where somebody's, the left side of the brain understands, well, maybe you don't use water the way I think you did, but the emotional side of the brain says, but I still don't want that in the backyard right, because it's going to be ugly and it's
right,
going to kill the birds.
And it wasn't here before.
And change is hard. Change is
hard. I want it to be the same forever and ever.
Yeah. So this is about humans. We're as much as we'd like to sometimes to say we're just purely analytical, we're going to follow the facts. We're all emotional creatures.
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm very sensitive when I have conversations with people. I want to hear how they're feeling.
Right.
I can give them facts and information, but that's only good for this half of their head.
Right.
This half of their brain. We've got to find a way to make people more comfortable. And and one of the things we've done is we'll take people to one of our operating data centers, and it's an amusing anecdote, right? But no names, no city names, nothing. Right? But get the individuals there outside the fence, and they're like, okay, well there it is. I guess it's not as ugly as I thought it was going to be. But so when are you going to turn it on so I can hear how loud it is? And it's like it's been on. It's been on for years.
Oh.
Right? And see that neighborhood over there, see that house like, a block and a half away.
They don't.
They're fine. They were concerned when it came in here too, And now,
Probably worse to have a pickleball court next to you or something.
let's not besmirch pickleball.
Right, I know.
But
Totally different.
But you get it. But but it's on. It's been on for years. And if you'd like to go over and talk to that person, in that neighborhood that 5 years ago, X years ago, was concerned about this too. Let's go do that.
Yeah.
So we do our best to educate, but as humans, we've got to both hemispheres of the brain are involved in this, and
Absolutely.
we're struggling. I'll just say for me, I don't want to say we, but I'm struggling a bit to understand sometimes how to emotionally connect with somebody when it's the emotions, the raw emotions. So I don't want that thing in my yard, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So as we wrap up here, though, what I'll give you the last word. What would you like people to take away from our conversation about data centers?
Wow.
I know, so open-ended.
That's tough and open-ended.
But if you're going to save data centers,
I keep coming back around to, one of the things I said earlier in this, right? I'll use the word everybody. It's not literally everybody on the planet, but I think Instagram, Facebook, they have like 4 or 5 billion users, billion with a B. There's 8 billion people on the planet. So, nearly everybody on the planet is using these things, right? And everybody wants to keep using it. And then this is just, I'm going to say, this is the price that you pay. I don't want to make it sound like a cost. But if you want social media, if you want Instagram, if you want YouTube, if you want Gmail, if you want everything, and if you want your phone to continue to work, and you want to say, well, I want directions to find me a restaurant that has sushi that's open from 10 to 2 that has a table for me with 2 people, right? If you want to be able to do that, this is the vehicle that gets you there, right? I think there are a lot of folks...
And you're going to be a good neighbor.
And we're going to be a good neighbor. I think there are a lot of folks that said, Henry Ford, I don't need that car thing that you're working on. My horse is just fine.
Right.
IBM, I don't need that newfangled typewriter thing you're working on. I'm over here with my pen and my quill and I'm doing just fine. Or, hey, IBM, I don't need that personal computer. My typewriter works just fine. Don't try to change me, right? So
it's all progress.
We're evolving. So I think progress is driving this, right? And everybody in this room, everybody's got one of these, right? And we use it every day. I can't live without my phone. Nobody can,
right?
And so I don't want to say,
except for my 11-year-old, because I won't let him get one. But
that's good. That's a good move. I've got a 7.5-year-old. We're not there yet.
Yeah.
But so I don't want to be glib about this, right? And I'm very sensitive to both the left brain and the right brain of people as they're concerned about what we're going to do. But we are all creating demand for this, and it's always felt good to me to be part of that change, to be part of that revolution, to make the computer faster, or to make the network faster, or to make the network lower latency, or to give you more. There's it's years ago in a startup, we built a successful first product, and we had to build a follow-on, and we just called it more.
Yeah.
Right? More. It's the same thing, but more. So people keep demanding more, and this is just one of the vehicles that we use to deliver it. So we're busy solving the problems for power, and to make sure that we're good to the community and to the ecosystem, and we're not poisoning the wells and doing those things. And again, we want to have these conversations with people where we could try to make a tangible impact on how they perceive what it is we're doing and why we're doing it. So
this is great.
I've enjoyed being part of that change. New challenges, right?
Yeah.
A year ago, all I could worry about was where am I going to find electricity? And now my challenge is how am I going to make sure that people in the community are good with us moving in and being a benefit to the community and understanding it. So.
Yeah, great. Well, I can't wait till we talk again to see how things work out. So thanks so much for joining us, Jeff.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, that's it for FCTV.